China is witnessing an unprecedented wave of unrest as thousands of workers have taken to the streets in multiple cities, demanding overdue wages and protesting against harsh working conditions. Reports from various independent sources and social media platforms indicate that these protests are not isolated incidents but part of a growing labor movement that has been brewing beneath the surface for months, possibly even years. The demonstrations, now spreading across key industrial hubs, are posing a serious challenge to Beijing's ability to maintain stability in a slowing economy. The protests began in several manufacturing zones in the country's southern and eastern provinces, where workers claim they have not been paid for months despite fulfilling contracts. Videos emerging from these areas show large groups chanting slogans, holding banners, and blocking factory entrances. Some protesters have clashed with local security forces, while others have staged sit-ins that have halted production in several plants. Social media footage, though heavily censored within China, has made its way to global audiences through encrypted platforms, drawing international attention to the plight of these workers. The workers' grievances go beyond just unpaid wages. Many have voiced concerns about deteriorating safety standards, excessive overtime without compensation, and the lack of basic benefits. This unrest reflects a broader frustration within the Chinese working class, particularly in sectors like textiles, electronics manufacturing, and construction industries that have historically powered China's export-driven economy. The current protests suggest that economic pressures, compounded by recent global trade tensions and domestic policy shifts, have reached a breaking point for many laborers. In some cities, protests have spilled over from industrial areas into public squares and government buildings. Eyewitness accounts describe scenes where workers and their families marched en masse, demanding meetings with local officials. In one striking incident in the Guangdong province, thousands gathered outside a municipal government office, chanting for justice and waving documents proving their unpaid wages. Authorities attempted to disperse the crowd using standard public order measures, but the demonstrators remained defiant, vowing not to leave until their demands were met. China's state media has been largely silent on the matter, with only vague references to labor disputes and economic adjustments appearing in official channels. However, the scale of the demonstrations is becoming increasingly difficult to conceal, especially as global media outlets pick up the story. The Chinese government's traditional approach to such unrest. Swift crackdowns combined with selective concessions may be tested as the protests spread to multiple provinces simultaneously. The internet blackout in some affected areas suggests that authorities are keen to prevent coordination among protest groups. The timing of these protests is particularly sensitive for Beijing. China's economic growth has been slowing, with manufacturing output declining and youth unemployment reaching record highs. Foreign investment has also shown signs of wavering, partly due to global supply chain reconfigurations and geopolitical tensions. Labor unrest, especially on this scale, threatens to undermine the image of stability that China seeks to project both domestically and internationally. For foreign companies operating in the country, the disruption to production lines and the risk of reputational damage add another layer of concern. In the industrial city of Ningbo, factory workers producing electronics components staged a large-scale walkout, demanding full payment of back wages and the implementation of safer working conditions. According to local accounts, the protests began peacefully but escalated after security personnel attempted to remove protest leaders. The standoff reportedly lasted several hours, resulting in dozens of arrests. Despite the crackdown, workers returned to the streets the following day, gaining support from nearby communities. Some labor rights advocates point to the lack of independent trade unions in China as a key factor contributing to the escalation. The official All-China Federation of Trade Unions is seen by many as a state-controlled entity that often fails to represent workers' interests effectively. Without a legitimate channel to address grievances, workers are increasingly resorting to collective action, even at the risk of arrest or worse. International labor organizations have begun to issue statements condemning the suppression of peaceful protests and calling on the Chinese government to engage in dialogue with workers. Human rights groups have also expressed concern about the safety of those involved in the demonstrations, warning that arrests could lead to long-term detentions under charges of disturbing public order or inciting unrest. These charges, according to rights activists, are often used to silence dissent. The economic impact of the unrest is already being felt. Several factories have temporarily shut down due to the protests, disrupting supply chains for domestic and international clients. Analysts warn that if the situation escalates, it could further weaken investor confidence in China's manufacturing sector, which is already under pressure from rising labor costs and competition from emerging economies. Despite the risks, the determination of the protesting workers appears to be growing. In multiple provinces, solidarity actions have been reported, with workers from different industries joining forces. This level of coordination is unusual in China, where authorities maintain tight control over public gatherings and information flow. Some observers believe this could mark the beginning of a broader labor movement that challenges not just specific employers but the systemic issues facing China's working class. The central government now faces a dilemma: crack down harder on the protests to reassert control, or offer meaningful concessions that could be perceived as a sign of weakness. Either path carries significant political and economic consequences. In the short term, the priority for Beijing will likely be to restore order and limit the spread of unrest. However, the underlying causes ranging from wage disputes to broader economic uncertainty will not be easily resolved. For the workers on the front lines, the struggle is about more than just money. It is about dignity, fairness, and the right to be heard in a system that often prioritizes economic targets over individual well-being. Whether or not their protests succeed in securing immediate demands, they have already sent a powerful message. China's labor force, long considered compliant and controllable, is willing to take risks to fight for its rights. As the days unfold, the world will be watching to see how China responds to this rare display of organized labor resistance. The outcome could have far-reaching implications, not only for the future of workers' rights in the country but also for China's position in the global economic order. If the protests continue to spread and gain momentum, they could mark a turning point in the relationship between the Chinese state, its industries, and the millions of workers who form the backbone of its economy.